So I am delighted to have a special guest with us today. We have Charlotte Watts, who is a yoga teacher, nutritional therapist, and an author. It is so great to have you here chatting to us today, Charlotte. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello.
We were just talking off camera, weren't we, about the million questions that I pretty much sent to you because you have such an expansive knowledge and experience in lots of facets. So there's so much to talk about. But to kickstart, can you just talk us through how you started? How did you get into yoga?
Yeah, I came to yoga from quite chronic illness in my 20s. I'd had depression, chronic fatigue, anxiety, IBS, whole migraines, whole bunch of stuff in my early years, and it was very much a kind of if I don't do this now, then I will end up in somewhere. Yeah, it could have gone it could have gone one or two ways, I think. So that's part of me also. Well, one of the things was I had really, really chronic back pain, like really like profound back pain, and I'd been told by physiotherapists I kind of needed to learn to re-walk. So there's the kind of physical aspect, but it was also realization. It's what we realize about kind of trauma these days. But these words weren't even around. I don't think we even used the word depression in that day. Um, but yeah, this recognition that I'd never really been in my body. Since then, like kind of decades of work I've done has been, so much of this is to that realization of dissociation, of how profound it can be and how easy it is to be disembodied. So it was very much for that, and it was coming into my body when I really never had been before. Was excruciating. It was so horrible. And partly physically I couldn't move very well. And also it was in terms of emotional pain, it was intense. There's a lot of anger in there that was just kind of coming out and just being felt as pain. And yeah, but I kind of just knew I needed it. It was one of those kind of difficult journeys to go through. So yeah, I feel I have a very rich relationship with the path that I've trod on it.
And was that your very first introduction to yoga, as it were, or had you done other styles of yoga before?
No. It was very much. I went to a class at Brighton Natural Health Centre. And yeah, it was it. It was Iyengar style. Was all that was around in those days. Um, yeah, that was definitely the first.
And when you talk about, I mean, that sort of raw emotion that was coming out, is that normal for the work you do? Like, we're going to talk about the somatic work.
Mm.
Obviously, it's for all different people, at different stages of their life, and we're all going through different things. Is it normal for someone that's maybe listening that isn't familiar with somatics or teaching somatics? Is that normal to go through that process that you experienced?
I think it doesn't really matter what the practice is called. It's certainly true when we're meeting anything that asks us to meet our vulnerability or make space, because it's very, very easy, and a lot of people do a lot of it, which is to be very physical and to, in many ways, hide from ourselves, or in a practice where we might call it yoga, but not really make the space to feel. It can be just going through the motions, and in many ways even practicing within a state of dissociation. So yeah, normal's a tricky word. I mean, it's hard to know. It's hard to feel what another person feels. Um, but people who are prepared to turn up to a practice where there is space, even if they haven't recognized that something is um, very specifically needed, there's something in them somewhere recognizes that you're just going to have to meet the stuff. Um, because it's here anyway. And often it's just running around the system, causing inflammation, suffering in various ways, bodily, mentally, emotionally.
Yeah, and sometimes it's that having that time and space, isn't it, to know that there's something going on within, like recognizing it and then taking those first steps to sort of do something about it and address it.
Yeah, and it's I mean, it's so I mean, it's, for me, it's certainly part of the way I learnt yoga, um, and it's certainly part of the way I teach, is that this stepping away from any sense of an aim,
Mm.
or as is really kind of lit large in, a lot of what we're conditioned to do, which is, in terms of body or mind, is through the modern medical model, which is often looking at what is wrong. Someone else externally tells you what is wrong, and then a fix, whether that is, we're talking psychologically or physically, and those things are separated out. So we're quite used to doing that. It's quite usual for people to want to say, "Tell me what's wrong. How do I fix it?" And we're, moving away from any of that kind of solution based um, attachment. Is, for me, is a huge key part of the practice, and it's how I learned yoga was. It's about being. It's not about jumping in to do this in order to get this result, because often that's also not necessarily what we need, because a lot of what we think we need is rather different to what we actually need. But the mind is a busy, greedy thing that wants to kind of stay in control. um so much of practice, and this is the characteristic of mindful practice, is to notice when the mind is trying to run the show, and in many ways to drop beneath that radar of the front brain, as T.S. Little puts it. So yeah, it in so many ways a noticing, um, and a navigating, being in the present moment with whatever shows up, because that actually is the only thing that ever really has the potential to allow us to feel safety. And all of this is, in the nervous system. It's all about um, what we're navigating to find some sense of safety, whether that's real safety or appropriate for the moment. That's all up for grabs. But yeah, we're kind of doing the best we can. So to be able to notice that, um, and start to have a space where people can just be, rather than this constant interpretation, analyzing what's wrong, how do I fix it. It's exhausting.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, I 100% agree. It is exhausting. It's always like there isn't always a solution, just being in your body in that moment. And you talk about, so your course, Yoga and Somatics for Healing and Recovery, which is online training, you talk about embodied awareness in your teachings. I've read a lot about that on your website. How is it explored in the course for those that are perhaps newer to that concept? They might already be doing it, but maybe not aware. How do you delve into that in the course?
Yeah, it's I love this course. It's just all the components of things that have, A, really speak to me, and B, have really helped me along the way. Um, and so really kind of laying out the stall for that. The first thing for me, and it's an online training with four in-person workshops. But the online training part of it, which can be done alone, are 10 themes. So we work through 10 themes, and each one has a practice and presentations and notes, and then an hour's live session to discuss that and bring it together and see what it means to people and what they might need in terms of clarification. And the first part for me is something that was, so liberating. I'm only really interested in knowledge, not just for knowledge's sake, not for learning more things to tick more boxes, but for what is actually real, what actually translates into real visceral experience. And for me, along the way, that was, learning stuff about what it means to be a modern human, and the type of stress, the psychosocial stress we tend to have. When I was kind of, this is stuff I went through my nutritional therapy training, and that's what I ended up kind of specializing in. That's so profound. Like if you don't have that in the mix, it doesn't really matter if you're teaching a specific class. These are the people who are walking in to any yoga class at all. And really, to recognize what it is to be in a culture where things are fast, large, capitalist. You can't be enough or have enough. It's endless, and very little emptying out and very little real space. Throw technology in the mix and very little actual time with self, um, or with a way that really resources us, so that we can feel all the stuff. There's loads of distraction available, let's face it. So really recognizing the nature of that, is the stuff that for me is absolutely crucial to hold space for others. Um, and it's stuff like knowing kind of signs and symptoms of people being in heightened nervous system states. And then we make a journey through that in terms of like trauma informed stuff, polyvagal stuff, all these ways of, they're modalities, they're models, ways of looking at things, which don't mean we need to really get into interpretation or the pinning something down, but to give a kind of a flavor and a richness to what it is to be human. And that really helps holding space for others. It helps people to hold space for others, whether it's not just all about the doing, this modern postural yoga that's become so kind of purely physical. So yeah, we go through trauma stuff, we go through belly stuff, enteric nervous system, second brain stuff. We go through stuff around posture and what it is to stand up in our sense of self, bring in certain models of body psychotherapy, which is also taking a look at what kind of modern chakra theory means in our quite psychologically based culture, and then weaving that in with what is kind of mindful language and the ways that we can bring curiosity into our own states in very real ways, that actually allow us to again hold space for others. So yeah, a real kind of journey in that, and then an assessment at the end where people get to, and that's the I've just done that live session actually with some students. It's that pulling out what has spoken to people at the end, and people do assessments on various different things, and it's going to be what is appropriate for them, what is it they're exploring, or what is it they need to bring into reality in their teaching. Yeah, so it's a lovely kind of journey to go through with people.
It sounds fantastic. And I just want to go back to your earlier point about, when someone, because my next question is about the yoga teachers that are listening that are thinking, wow, this is what I want to go into. And my next question was about, what can yoga teachers do with the course? Can they become specialists? But I just want to go back to your earlier point about, when someone walks into a class, is there a way to recognize that someone is perhaps in a stress or trauma response or going through something? Coming from all of your experience and your expertise and your own personal journey.
Yeah, so sometimes not. We certainly can't assume. And we also, one of the first things that when a bunch of people walk into a class, and back in the day, it might have been that a teacher has a particular cohort of students that they become very familiar with, and some teachers do have that. There's a kind of growth of a community there. But there's certainly teachers who are teaching like different people all the time and having to navigate that. One thing is that we can't assume or anything for anybody. Sometimes the people who look like they're most together are the people who are actually really good at holding it together from the outside, and don't want to show vulnerability. So, sometimes the people who are kind of seem like they're spilling it out everywhere are actually quite good at regulating it because they're able to just be that with other people. I'm playing devil's advocate there a little bit because the opposite can be true. So, firstly, I wouldn't assume anything, and it's certainly it's a very important thing for a teacher, teacher, is that we can't experience or feel what another person feels. So in many ways, it's a stepping back from the idea that you can know. And what that really highlights is, for me, the arriving, this place of arriving is so important. It's very different to any kind of notion that you get into a class and we just get going. Here we are, we're going to do. For me, as a teacher, that place of what's in the room, what's here, what's present, what's happening, um, is a place where I'm working out. And I'm not working out any idea that I know what's going on for someone, but there are certain, you can see certain people might fidget, or their eyes might dart around, or they can't quite get comfortable, um, and some of that is about attending to their positioning. It's very, but people have a lot of tension in the back of the neck. It's incredibly common for them to lay down and chin lifts up to the ceiling. And in order to soften in the eyes and the front brain, they're going to need something underneath their skull. And some of that is the attention needed to do that with a student. It's that coming in and being in relation, and supporting a sense of trust in that. And also, just working out if they want that or not. If they like being, some people don't want to be helped. And so some of that is like working out, those very human relationships. So it's interesting because we can be, feel that we should be told what to do in a certain situation, but a lot of this actually is recognizing that we can trust our responses as an empathetic human being. What is it we need to kind of navigate or get through in order to access that parts of ourselves that actually, knows. And that's a wisdom thing over being taught specific cues about specific things.
Yeah. And then on the course, I suppose, with everything that you've talked about, the areas that you delve into, which are just fascinate me, I guess the teachers that journey through that with you go through that process themselves. So then what you've just talked about, holding that space, if they've already been through those practices, they can just become aware themselves and then
Yeah.
hold that space for others. So that must be so powerful. So teachers that are listening, that are thinking, yes, what do you specifically, do you keep it open? Like, do you say you could do specific classes after they've graduated?
Right. Yeah. I mean, firstly, that what you were saying, the beginning there is really pertinent, and a lot of people will do this course and say, "Do you know what? I give out a lot to teaching, and now I need to do something for myself." So sometimes it's certainly started as a personal journey. Some people will turn up and say, "Well, I want to do this because I want to teach the stuff," and along the way, they kind of go, "Do you know what? I need this." And that's often the root of it. And I think that's absolutely key. One of the first things I asked to do in preparation for the first session, the arriving session, is a core values exercise, just to feel out what is the stuff that resonates with you, what is the stuff that you need. And this really then keys into what you were saying after, which is that if we are not fostering, cultivating, tending the ground of our own awareness, there's no way that we can be holding that for others. It has to be like Judith Lester says, teacher first, student second, asana down the line. We need to, and recognizing our own need for things like grounding, orientation, these facets of presence, and our boundaries. Where do we end and students begin? Tending to all of this stuff is the stuff that allows us then to hold space without it being too effortful. It doesn't actually pull at our own resources too much, because in many ways we're just showing up, and that's this word that's been so in so many ways co-opted. This authenticity. It's a real thing. It's a visceral thing. That is about, well, as a teacher, we're essentially holding a space to co-regulate with another in order that someone else can find their own self-regulation. So we need to be able to self-regulate in order that we're holding that for others. And also, this is modern teaching. We're not looking for someone to, I don't know, maybe you are looking for someone to just follow us. the exalted one. It's very much about finding our way and kind of co-creating something with others. And I'm very interested in that, the kind of egalitarian, that we're all kind of we're showing up, and actually it is finding self-regulation in order that when you're not uh, becoming dependent on a teacher or another for that. It is something you take into the rest of your life.
Yeah, I mean, it's so fascinating. And you mentioned the belly. Does this
Mm.
link nicely into the other extensive work that you do? Yoga therapy for digestive health. Is that what you meant when you were talking about the belly, or is that something different?
Yeah, I mean, it ties in there. I mean, that's I do a more specific course on teaching yoga for digestive health, um, and it's interesting because for me they just interweave entirely. I came to yoga, partly, as I mentioned, for quite profound IBS, um, and not to come in to do specific practices for digestive health, but really along the way, that unraveling, that working out, that all of these facets that ultimately do help digestion, because particularly in yoga philosophy, digestion is digestion of all of life's experiences. um so the recognition of the stuff that we hold into tissues, we hold into the organs, chronic stress, trauma patterns have us bracing into the center. They keep us in more inflammatory tones. There's a kind of upregulation in the gut brain axis. So yeah, all of this stuff ties in, whether it's something that is part of a larger trauma informed practice, or something that is specifically about coming to support people whose dis-ease, so that moving away from sukha or ease within yoga, that dis-ease is expressing in something that's showing up in the digestive tract. Um, and for me, whenever I'm teaching, it's always from the digestive tract. It's the central line of us. It's the central axis. It's what we evolved around. And the belly is it's our deeper stuff. It's our unconscious, our elder stuff. So to drop down into it is that antidote to dropping beneath the busy brain thing. It supports us dropping beneath that radar of the front brain, and it's what allows us to slow down. Belly wants to go slower. It innovates. It works in parasympathetic and in soothing tones of the nervous system. It shuts off when we go into more excited tones of the nervous system. So in so many ways, it's a route in. And something as simple as bringing our attention or our hands onto our belly, or inviting breath in the belly, is a route in to that interface with our nervous system, to that relating into ourselves, and bringing our attention down away from this very busy headspace. So yeah, it's kind of, it's all, it's always there. For me, this stuff is one big kind of web, and which bit we're kind of focusing in on at any time is where we can wander with it.
It's so interesting when we think about digestive health, and it's almost frustrating, isn't it, that when we think about the NHS, like there's so much work that can be done. When you talked about trauma being stored in the tissues,
Mm.
it's a shame that it isn't prescribed, isn't it, on the when you go to see a doctor.
Yeah, it's getting there. I doing I do a lot of work on kind of gut brain axis stuff, and I was looking at the research in terms of gut brain axis, in terms of, well known in terms of links to mental health, particularly anxiety, depression, and those IBS, anxiety and depression, are also described as diseases, diseases, not my words, that's just the words that we use, of interoception, conditions of interoception. So, all this points to the fact that when we are not turning inwards, when we are not looking inwards, or hearing inwards, or listening inwards, or feeling inwards, whatever works, the way that we process that, is then it kind of relays are not safe. When we don't know where we are, where our body is, it's a not safe. And this really ties in with, simple stuff that when we are at a baseline, when we're able to come down of heightened responses, then we breathe down into the diaphragm and the belly. Soon as we go into any kind of anything that's protective or heightened, or fight or flight response or freeze response, then our breath goes up into the upper chest and the shoulders. We go into secondary breathing. So immediately we shut off from the feelings. So this kind of coaxing, bringing the feelings back online and having a relation with them, and those kind of non-judgmental, compassionate ways of listening in and responding. It's really chicken and egg stuff. If we're not listening in, we can't access feelings of the belly. If we can't access feelings of the belly, we can't listen in. It's it's all very cyclical.
And then talk to us in a little bit more depth about teaching yoga for digestive health. I'm fascinated in this subject. So if someone's listening and thinking, yes, I'm interested in that course, what can they sort of expect?
Well, I do tend to, first of all, as I said previously, I am not into kind of, what's wrong, how to fix it. And this is very much part of being a nutritional therapist as well, which is very much like, what are the body systems? What is there? How do they function optimally? How do we support that? If you take the kind of yoga model of wellness into this and see anything that's kind of interrupted in terms of optimal healthy function, it's where is the interruption in terms of prana? Where is the interruption in terms of the flow? So although, I certainly do talk about specific conditions, recognizing all the components that allow us to function fully are really, really key. So stuff around kind of psoas, the diaphragm, the jaw, the territory, the ability for organs to breathe and move fascially, all of that's, really looking at the kind of landscape from underneath to support how we optimally function and which are the practices that help us to do that. And for me, I'm always interested in weaving in more kind of fluid, inquiring, exploring practices into what might be called traditional asana. And that kind of, an example is things like, spine undulation, just undulating through the spine, synchronizing breath with movement in that way, feeling from the belly what we might need in terms of movements within certain shapes, the difference between how our digestive system is going to feel, it's going to express, whether we're laying down, standing up. We are basically, these strange bipedal creatures. It's very unusual that the most of the, when we're going to be moving around, then to have our gut vertically down, head above our feet, is really unusual. Look at my cat. He's got this horizontal gut thing going on. So it is very much part and parcel of a lot of things that we're doing that we play out in somatic practices, which are very much about our own evolution bodily from the womb out and as a species. A lot of kind of somatic movements follow these very primal motions that we need, and particularly for the digestion, that's a lot of kind of spiraling motions, which are very natural for walking, but also freeing up kind of lines that allow us to have space into the belly, that allow us to come into diaphragmatic movement, which is incredibly important for digestive health. So it's pulling in lots of stuff that just kind of brings together lots of components without those feeling that they're separate things. Ultimately, that they're all part of tuning in to the belly and what we need there, along the way of recognizing that the very nature of this stuff is in and of itself trauma informed, because you can't teach this stuff around the belly without recognizing that, start moving there, and stuff is going to come up, but it's not stuff that wasn't there already. For many people, it's stuff that they're holding away from or holding down. So this titration, this meeting ourselves where we are, and just a little bit by little bit, and what doesn't feel too much or floods the system at any one time is a guide throughout.
That is so fascinating. I felt myself, because I'm at a standing desk, I felt when you talk about spiraling movements, I felt like I started to move in that way, which
Yeah.
makes total sense. For anyone listening that perhaps doesn't want to specialize in this area in terms of classes or teaching, this would work, or would it? I'll ask you, for someone that's perhaps got a condition such as IBS, is it suitable for those sorts of people, or is it specifically for teachers? You're teaching yoga for
Yeah.
digestive.
Yeah, plenty of people come along for their own exploration, and in many ways that kind of frees up the space. When you haven't got that I've got to teach this thing running in the background, in many ways I imagine it's a lovely space to be in. Yeah, particularly if there's a curiosity in there in terms of the way that we work as an orchestration, the way this kind of, incredible closed system of our body mind um is orchestrated together, because that then just gives the chance to explore these things with that kind of curious stepping back of going, what if, I did that, and this happened, and no, didn't like that much, which is great, because as my original teacher always said, you don't have to like it, which is really important bit of guidance along the way when you're exploring stuff that's coming up that's not always easy. So yeah, for those who are exploring it in ways that aren't necessarily simply for teaching, it can be a lovely journey. And similarly, um I always say this on courses, particularly right at the beginning, try and get your teaching head out of the way, because otherwise you can't actually really experience. If you're always kind of showing up for something with I want to teach this, or getting up and making notes, or you've gone, then you don't get to really feel it deep within, and in that way it's difficult. There's more between you and meeting another person and their experience. So I tend to have that in mind when I design courses, is try and give the information in as many ways as possible, so people don't feel they have to keep grasping at the information, or that it's not going to be there. So I tend to do loads of notes, loads of videos, etc., presentations, so the information is always there, and that hopefully frees people up to be able to simply practice, which in so many ways is more illuminating than any of it.
Yeah, and I think that's so fantastic that you sort of provide all of that, so people can actually just arrive and embody the practice. Like you say, that makes sense, teacher first. That is
Yeah.
absolutely fascinating. And I am lucky enough to have both of your books, Yoga Therapy for Digestive Health and Yoga and Somatics for Immune and Respiratory Health. So you are very busy, but such incredible, incredible work, completely fascinating. So thank you for chatting with us today. If people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Yes, my websites are charlottewattshealth.com. And one for yoga teachers is somatictherapeuticyoga.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much for giving us your time today, Charlotte.
My pleasure. Lovely to talk to you. Thank you.